So recently I got free credits from DigitalOcean and I decided to use the opportunity to make a video on how to deploy an application on the production VPS. In this video, I'll cover setting up your VPS securely. I'll show you how to actually deploy your application on the VPS. Then I'll show you how to set up a CI/CD pipeline, and I'll talk about a couple of other things in this video. And I know some people might have a question: why would you deploy an application on VPS in 2025? And I'll give you a couple reasons why you should know how to do that. The first reason is because when you're deploying on a VPS, it's generally more maintainable. You can actually manually configure everything yourself. Second reason is because platforms like Vercel and Netlify are very good initially, but as you begin to have more users on your application, these platforms can become really expensive. And the last reason is generally I think it's a good idea to actually know how to work on bare bones servers. So let's dive into this video. In this video, we'll be using DigitalOcean as our VPS provider. So the first thing you're going to want to do is click on create and select Droplets. Droplets is the brand name for VPS in DigitalOcean. First thing you're going to want to do is select your region. Ideally, you choose a region that's closest to you, and then you pick your operating system. Next, we're going to pick the CPU and disk option that best suits us, and then I'm going to create a root password. After we create a root password, we're going to create a host name that's going to be easy to remember for our VPS. And when we're done, we're just going to look over all our choices, and then we click on create droplets. Now, after a few minutes, our VPS is ready and we can start to use it. Now we have access to the VPS. What we're going to do is we're going to change our DNS records. Specifically, we're going to make sure our A records point to the IP address for our VPS. Now, what we're done with that, we're going to connect to our VPS via SSH using our terminal, using the SSH root command. And once we log in to the root user, what we're going to do is we're going to create a non-root user using the add user command. We're then going to add user's information, and once we're done adding the user's information, we're going to use the supermod command to give the user sudo privileges. In the next part of this tutorial, we'll be focusing on securing our VPS. The first way we're going to do this is by disabling login to our root user. We're also going to use a firewall. So the firewall we'll be using is going to be UFW, which is uncomplicated firewall. The last method we're going to use is fail to ban. This is going to ban anybody that's trying to brute force into our server. The reason why we're doing this is because there are actually bot scanners that are running 24/7 around the internet, and they're certainly going to hit your VPS. There was a time where I left the default port for Redis open, and my application started acting weird, and when I checked my Redis, I saw that someone actually put a crypto mining script in my Redis database. It's very important that you get this part right. The next thing we're going to do is go to the SSH config file, and we're going to uncomment permit root login, and we're going to change the value to no. Another thing to consider is changing the port of your SSH. So the default port for SSH is port 22. But in this case, I'm not going to change the default port. But if you decide to change your default port, you should take note of it because you need it every time you try and log into your terminal. And then we're going to restart to make sure that our changes are applied. Now we're going to add SSH login to the non-root user. First thing we're going to do, we're going to check if we have the ID RSA SSH key. And we're going to use the ls command to check if we have it. But if you do not have it, you can easily generate one using the SSH keygen command on the screen. So what we're going to do, we're going to add our SSH key to our own VPS so we can log in from this computer using SSH. So we won't have any need to enter a password using the SSH copy ID command. Now we can SSH into our server without having to enter a password. Now that is done, we're going to actually add the firewall. We're going to use this firewall to block all the unused ports. We're going to start by using the force reset command. So we're going to set the default to deny any incoming request and allow every outgoing request. And we're only going to open 3 ports for incoming requests. So the first port we're going to open for incoming requests is going to be the SSH port, which is port 22. The next port is port 80 for HTTP and port 443 for HTTPS. And then to make sure that these changes are enabled, we're going to run the enable command and we're going to check the status. Now that that is done, the next thing we're going to do is install fail to ban. And fail to ban is already running, but if you want to configure it to your demands, you're just going to go to the jail.config file, and then the main things you're going to want to change are the max retries and the ban time. Now what we're doing is we're going to install Docker and Docker Compose, and you can see I'm actually installing it from an article, and I'm just going to go on and finish everything off, and I am going to leave the article in the description below so you can follow the article. We have two Docker files and we have a single Docker Compose file. So the first Docker file, we're using it to build our Next.js application, and then the second Docker file is actually for caddy. So we are building caddy as well on a second Docker file. For the reverse proxy, I decided to go with caddy. Generally, most people tend to go with Nginx, and the reason why I decided to go with caddy is because it's easier to use. And secondly, when you use caddy, you actually get automatic HTTPS certificate, so there's no need to use setbot or configure cron jobs. Now, when someone types in a URL, it's sent to port 443 or port 80, and then caddy redirects our request to port 3000 where our application is running. For our CI/CD pipelines, I'm going to go with GitHub Actions in combination with Appleboy SSH. I'm also going to have a bash script that is going to check if there are any changes to our remote repository, and if there are any changes, we're going to pull down those changes. Checking if there's any change to our schema, and if there's any change to our schema, we're also going to migrate our database, and then we're going to build and run our application. Now to set up CI/CD, we're using GitHub Actions, and we have a very short file. I have a very short way of doing it. So we're going to use appleboy/ssh, and all we need is the VPS address, the username, and the private key. So all we need to do is provide these details as a GitHub Action secret. I'm going to use the change directory command to the folder where application is hosted, and I'm going to run the update script, and I'm going to show you guys the update script in a second. So if you look at our update script, what we do first is we pull any new changes, and if there were any schema changes, we're going to just change the environment variables, because we have special environment variables specifically for our database. We're going to run Docker Compose up in detached mode and we're going to run --build. The reason why we do this is that we want to update our containers. So we want to update our containers, but we don't want them to go down. And then we're just going to use Docker image prune and Docker container prune to clean up any unused resources. And that's about it. What we're going to do is we're going to clone our remote repository into our VPS server. Then we're going to test out a CI/CD pipeline. So I'm going to make a couple of changes. The first change I'm going to make is, if you look at our landing page, I really don't like the banner that's on the landing page right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the banner, and I'm also just going to change the color of the button from a gradient color to just plain blue. And also I'm going to change the color of the button to blue, and yeah, I'm going to use Copilot to make the changes. And once I'm done with the changes, I'm just going to commit and push it to Git repository. And now when we go to GitHub Actions, you can see that we have some changes on the way. So we can see that our CI/CD pipeline is actually working. And when we go to the website, we see that the changes that we made are reflected. So our CI/CD pipeline is actually working, which is good. Now our application is deployed on our VPS. And this is why I'll consider production already, but there's still a couple of things to consider. The first thing you'll notice is that since we've actually blocked all the ports by firewall, if you wanted to use something like pgadmin, you actually can't directly use it. So you have to use what we call SSH Tunnels. I said you can actually decide to add monitoring for your VPS. So you're going to check when your CPU usage is above 80%, for instance, and you can send Discord alerts to your phone. And I decided not to do this in this video, or in this instance, for two reasons. First of all, making a video about monitoring using something like Prometheus or Grafana, that can actually be a video by itself. Second of all, I don't have enough users to actually even be worried about that right now. Also, something else to consider is that in my SaaS, I actually send Discord alerts to my phone. So let's say I'm outside and someone decides to sign up for my services, I actually receive alerts from that. The last thing I think you can consider if you want to improve upon your VPS is adding something like load balancing but you can decide to research more about that. But those are just a couple of things that you should consider when making your VPS production ready. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out. So thank you for your time. And that's the end of this video.